That noise you heard was me unwrapping a cough drop. Good morning, everybody. I'm Larry Jacobs. This is K-12 Education Talk Radio. It's January 23rd, 2024, and I'm just coming off a COVID rebound. Okay, had COVID a week or so ago. Be careful out there because I was fully vaccinated and I still got it with this new strain going out there. And then I had the rebound, so I describe myself as feeling like my head is the same size as Seabiscuit today, and my voice, pardon the pun, is a bit hoarse. Okay, so what can I tell you? You know, it's that kind of a day. But luckily, to cheer me up and make this podcast today here on Pre-K-12 Education Talk Radio, we have great guests. We have Julie Weatherly, the incredible special education attorney and founder of Resolutions in Special Education. That's RISE. Okay, and we'll let her explain everything that Julie does. Okay, the Weatherly Report, etc. She really is great to know about special education. And she is the guest of my always special guest, Phyllis Wolfram, who's the executive director of the Council of Administrators of Special Education. And please pardon me if I sound a little nasally or hoarse or scratchy or whatever word you want to use today. It's just that I'm coming off this thing, but I'm doing just fine as I pop the cough drop into my mouth. Here we go. Ready? There you go. All right. Welcome to today's show. I'm Larry. We're going to archive the show over at ace-ed.org. We got a new issue of our magazine, Equity and Access, coming up I think it's up there now, but if not, it'll be up there later today on the 23rd. And all our information about the Equity Awards is over there as well, plus all the podcasts we do and our standard information about equity and access in today's pre-K-12 world. So please go over and check it out. Everything we do is free over at ace-ed.org. And without further ado, let me bring on my wonderful guest. We're going to talk about the Special Ed Administrators Case, the Council of Administrators of Special Education. They have their Academy of Law. And without question, let me bring on the Executive Director of such, okay, the one, the only Phyllis Wolfram. Hi, Phyllis. How's that for an introduction?
Good morning, Larry. Oh, my gosh. I need to have you come to every event I do. How's that? And do an introduction. That's fabulous. Cough drop cough drop. You're doing great.
Yeah, there is no introduction good enough, wide enough, big enough for you and all the good work you do, my darling. Okay?
Well,
great
thank
to have
you.
you here.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Great to be here with you.
It's a pleasure to have you here. And Julie, now that I'm cough dropped, how are you today?
I'm doing fine, Larry. Let me tell you something. I feel for you. Last time Phyllis and I actually did a national webinar together, I was sounding exactly like you, but probably even a little worse. I sounded like a honking goose. So I feel for you today.
It's amazing, and I feel just fine. Okay, I don't make a big deal out of it, but it is like I said, I feel like Seabiscuit on a good day, you know. So maybe I'll go out and do a run around the track or something. My head certainly feels that big. Whatever. It's great. Okay, it's great to have you here, Julie. It really is, and you do excellent work. And I'm going to ask both of you to define what you do. And since you're on, Julie, tell us what you do. And you are so terrific out there. You really are the leading. You probably won't accept this compliment. You're probably the leading attorney in special education across the U.S., and I know that Phyllis and the gang feels this way. Okay, you really know your stuff. Just tell everybody all about what you do and what your group. Thank you for another acronym, RISE, Resolution in Special Education. Thank you for the acronym. Tell us what you do, Jules, so everybody knows.
Well, first of all, Larry, flattery will get you everywhere.
There you go. I hope so.
I've been doing or practicing special education law now for, somewhere back in the dark ages, going on 38 years this year.
Wow.
Working with schools to effectively try to keep them out of what I call deep doo-doo process in special education matters. I learned early on that training the educators was also very important to me. So as my twilight years are coming, not anytime soon, but they're certainly on the horizon, I prefer to actually do the educational pieces and working with CASE and other organizations and districts and so forth, training educators on the pitfalls of making sure that they comply with the law and what can happen if they don't and that kind of thing. I do own a law firm. I have there's 3 lawyers. We represent mostly school districts here in the state of Alabama, but only in the area of special education. We are very specialized practitioners. We don't do general education work, although there's a whole lot of that as well. We focus only on special education and working with those school districts to help them resolve disputes as quickly as possible if we can, and represent them if we have to, if we go to some sort of formal proceeding. So that's what I've been doing for about 38 years
You have
now.
been doing it, and you have been doing it well, I got to tell you. Okay, you really have been, Julie, and you're so well respected out there. What got you interested in this side of, A, education law, and B, special education? What got you so interested in that? There's not that many people who practice that particular area.
Well, that's true. And, of course, again, when I started in the dark ages, there were very, very few. And I guess I could say I was lucky when I went to interview at a small law firm in Decatur, Georgia, that at the time represented the largest school district in the state. They were under siege with special ed litigation back in 1986. And there were no other lawyers in the firm that really wanted to do the work because it can be very emotional and somewhat touchy-feely, so to speak. So they basically interviewed me specifically to see if I would be interested. And fortunately, I'd never heard of this law. It was not something I learned in law school because it was such a discrete area and just up and coming. But when I was informed that there was a federal law that protected the educational interests of students with disabilities, I was very interested because in my youth I worked with Girl Scouts and other organizations and did a lot of activities related to students with disabilities in institutions and so forth. And so I was very excited that there was that area of law that I could practice. So I jumped in and ultimately realized there were a lot of school attorneys that don't really feel comfortable with this very specialized area.
Right.
And many times they'll be the general board attorney, but they want some help with special ed, and it just formed into its own separate practice. So I feel very fortunate. I work with lovely people.
And by the way, you're not heading into your twilight years. I want to make that point perfectly clear. You got a long way to go. Okay, so don't worry about that. Yeah, I hope so too. The Twilight, ladies and gentlemen, the Twilight Years of Julie Weatherly. It sounds like a good novel. Julie Weatherly, the Twilight Years. Okay, we got a long way to go. We got the sunrise. No, I won't get into it. I could do this for hours. Okay, I won't get into that at all. It's interesting when you say that there are laws on the books, but law school barely touched them. All right, and
absolutely.
And carry that over to it says probably to a certain extent today, but certainly when I was in teacher education, and Phyllis, you can talk about this. Okay, it's the same way education looked at special education. Okay, it was there, but nobody was talking about it. Okay.
And I think that over time. Yeah, it's just evolved. It's one of the most, I think you've heard me say this, Larry, it's one of the most complex federal laws on the books. And so much is in the regulations and even in the statute are not well developed. And it's left up to practice, and it's been left up to decisions of court cases to tell us as educators many times, here's the path you need to follow. Here's here's the guardrails. Here's the practices around this law. So it has truly evolved over the years. And as Julie said, when she first started out, there wasn't a lot there. Yeah. But when we think about the law is been around for a while, but it's not that old. And so again, it has evolved, and we know so much more about how the courts have interpreted many of the disputes that have come out. And so it gives us, again, those guidelines and those things to follow. And Julie has just been, she's been a dream for Case. And if you think back, she's been a friend of Case for a long, 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 long time. Yeah. Even before, Bridget and I came on board with Case, But during COVID, we found her to be a lifesaver for us. We threw out. We were out there in the raft, and we threw Julie a rope. She pulled us in, and we had many conversations about what should we be doing, and what does the law say, and getting information from the Department of Ed, and then interpreting that. So our visibility as case really, as we've talked about before, really boosted during that time. And now I feel like we continue to have that obligation to provide that professional learning to the field in the area of law, and Julie has been there to really help us do that.
And she's always been there. And I got to ask, I'll ask Julie this, and thank you, Phil. Okay. And by the way, CASE is a subsidiary of the Council for Exceptional Children. So it's casecec.org. Right. Yeah, if you want to check it all out. They were, by the way, on the Lori Vanderplug was on the show earlier today. Okay, which is really a nice show. It was about, check it out.
Yeah,
it was
good friend Lori.
Yeah, and it was about what we called inclusive leadership, trying to get that special ed school. That school leaders should look at special ed inclusively. Okay, and include it in everything they're doing. That's kind of what the theme of the show. It was, if I may say so, it was pretty darn good. And Julie, I got to ask you something. Okay, CASE is a national organization. You have a law firm that specializes in Alabama. Okay, because there's 50 states, there's 50 different departments of education. Okay, that's just the way we work it here. All right. Plus, of course, there's a federal Department of Education. Okay. All right.
Right.
How consistent?
Can you hear us giggling? We know what you're going to ask, but we are going to let you ask your question.
Well, I'm going to ask this question: how consistent are the laws from state to state to state? In other words, Washington. Let's just take Washington and Maine. My where I live, Maine. Okay, Washington, Nevada, whatever you want to talk about. How consistent are the laws? Does anybody learn?
Not terrible.
Help.
I will say, and that's what makes it kind of, frankly, a bit challenging, but also more interesting. You have your basic federal law, and federal law is supreme no matter what. And IDEA in Section 504, Section 504 not as much, but IDEA particularly is actually very specific in terms of its mandates. And that's your baseline for states. All of their state guidelines must consist of federal. Many states don't add to the federal scheme because it's already prescriptive enough. And so there are some assumptions as I travel around the country that pretty much in terms of that baseline is the same for everyone. But I acknowledge and try to understand and try to familiarize myself to some degree if I'm going in and to speak with a group at that's in a specific state that might do things a little bit differently. Surprisingly, it's not all that different. It's just a matter of whether a state Department of Education decides to add to the federal scheme. And sometimes they may put more protections in for students and their parents than the federal guidelines consist of, but they can't do less. None of them can do less. And so
really
even amongst the court decisions, they don't vary that much in terms of their rulings, and that's why we do the national quarterly weatherly review. And I feel like every case that comes out from any jurisdiction is somehow, some way going to be relevant in another jurisdiction. And I found that to be true as well. I mean, very often we'll have an issue that no court in Alabama has even looked at, and the State Department doesn't have anything specific related to that. So I start looking, for a federal judge in Iowa that had an opinion that might be persuasive. So because it's all generally, baseline is federal compliance, most states, Alabama, for instance, don't add to the scheme too much. Sometimes you'll have legislators that want to do certain things with respect to students with autism and add some protections or whatever it might be. But I try to find those things out before I go in and consult with a district or do a presentation in a particular state. I try to be familiar generally with what state additions might be there. But for the most part, like I said, they are all very consistent because it's a federal scheme. They have to comply with.
It does make it a little easier. I guess it does make it a little easier.
It does.
You know?
Mm-hmm. I guess.
Look,
Some would argue with me. Some would say, no, we'd rather do it our own way.
Yeah, but they do.
But they take the money, and they do. They have to do it the federal way. If they take the money.
Exactly. But if they don't take the money, they don't have to do it that way, right? Well, but that's still to do it that way, don't they?
Well,
I don't know. That's a good question. There you go. There's lawsuit number 5,000. Go ahead.
Right.
Yeah.
In fact, they already had that, believe it or not, early on.
I'm
there
sure.
were some states that didn't want to take on all of that. So they said, so what happens to us if we don't take the money? And 504 caught them because 504 is a different kind of statute that says you can't discriminate. So in essence, they were required to put programs in place. Might as well get some money to do it.
Wow. I'm going to. This is good. Today's the New Hampshire primary. Okay, conservatives, liberals. They're arguing over my neighboring state. Okay, the state where my kids grew up, over in New Hampshire. All right, I'm in Maine. Okay, and so I'm curious, what's going on out there right now? Okay, that's happening in across the country that we need to know. Okay, about Julie, what's happening?
Well, I will tell you, and this is, frankly, 38 years of doing this work, this has been the number one issue, and that is dealing with students who have significant behavioral issues. You could frame it in terms of just discipline of students with disabilities, but it shouldn't be all about discipline. It's really struggling with and over the years, it's increasingly so the hot topic because we are seeing a significant increase in the level of mental health concerns that we have in schools and that kind of thing. And so students are aggressive when they're not happy. And I was just on the phone yesterday with a psychologist, well-known psychologist, who is co-presenting with me at the Case Academy of Law and Leadership. In the spring, we were preparing for our co-presentation, and we had just this wonderful conversation. I learned so much in the 30 minutes just talking to him about, educators really not knowing exactly how to deal with all of these really aggressive and violent behaviors, and the go-to is to expel them or suspend them from school, and that's not doing anyone any good. And it is and continues to be the hottest topics since I've been doing this. There's the whole behavioral aspect and discipline. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
It's the hot, but we really need some help in mental health. From a political perspective,
that's across the board. Really... I was just watching PBS NewsHour the other night, and they were talking about just that, how teachers are really concerned about mental health. And I guess it all falls under special ed at that point, but it's just bad out there right now. Okay, and I hope the schools are training educators to work in this different environment that we have. Okay,
yes, absolutely.
And that's a real challenge, as discipline, et cetera, gets, tougher. Okay, the challenge is tougher, and the schools they still have to fulfill their obligation. All right, and I would imagine are there more lawsuits than ever these days, Julie, regarding all this?
So I'm always looking at that, and the end of December. The organization, national organization, you may have talked to them before, Larry, the Center for Appropriate Dispute Resolution, also known as CADRE.
I don't.
They specialize.
Yeah.
Oh, you don't? Okay, well,
no.
They're great.
Introduce me, please.
Phyllis,
send an email.
Phyllis will definitely do that.
Phyllis?
I will as well.
I am totally in.
Have I talked to Cadre? I haven't talked to Cadre. You haven't brought them up.
No. But you know what's on my list of things to do today?
There you go.
Please, top of the list. Top of the list.
I got you connected.
Put it on top of buy peanut butter. Buy extra crunchy peanut butter. Put it on top of the list. Good.
I will. I promise.
Thank you.
They do a lot of research via reports coming from state departments of education with respect to their complaint occurrences and the numbers and everything. So they issued in December results of their studies for the 2021-22 school year. And I was really interested to grab it just to see if my, experience here in Alabama with my firm and occurrences in due process were the same nationally.
Yeah.
And, written state complaints are that process under IDEA where parents can just file. I would say it's less formal, obviously. It's not formal litigation. It's just a complaint with the State Department. Apparently those have kind of remained relatively the same over like the last decade. There's been a jump, though, since 2020, apparently. And I did find, and Phyllis and I talked about this a good bit, that there was a little bit of, well, not even a little bit, maybe more than that, dip in the complaints generally, because I think parents were so concerned with COVID and, don't have time to complain about what's going on in school, and school closures. And I think even attorneys representing them and advocates didn't feel like it was the time to file a lot of complaints. But I think they're back up again at the state level. Due process seems to be, in terms of filings, have been up a little bit. But a lot of the numbers are skewed because the state of New York is like 65% of the complaints filed in special education come from the state of New York. So that skews things a little bit. Yeah. So it's really kind of interesting. But most of these, and their data is very clear on this, most of the due process filings do settle. They get resolved before they're fully adjudicated. And so not a lot of the formal complaints that are filed in the form of due process actually go to a due process hearing in full. But I can tell you, just because I'm very, very busy, there's a lot of litigation going on in special education.
I'm sure there is. And I have to say, what's with New York? Why is New York so high? Is there something in the system?
I really don't know. I can't say because this is clearly not data-based at all, but they do have several groups, law firm groups that represent families very, let's just say, zealously in New York.
Okay.
And, there are what we might refer to as the frequent filers who, they just have a whole lot going on. And number one, New York is a huge state. So
it is. It is.
Yeah, but generally, there was another article written too on litigation, and I noticed that the numbers from New York were kind of put to the side because they're so high.
Well, what's the usual complaint? What's the complaint of the parents or the student, however you want to say that? What's the usual?
The usual is just a general allegation that the school district has not provided a free, appropriate public education. And that's just in general, the parents aren't happy with the services that the child's receiving, or, for that matter, not receiving when they're supposed to, or the quality of the IEP, the individual education program or plan for the student. We are seeing a number and have for the last several years what we call child find cases, where parents allege that their children need to be evaluated and that they have not been evaluated appropriately for consideration for special education services.
Yeah, so, it's amazing because there's always a shortage of education special ed professionals, and yet the cases are rising. It's like it's just a vicious cycle. And I before I'm going to talk about the Academy of Law cases, but I have to ask this question. Okay, Julie isn't weird, but anecdotally, who's usually wins the cases? Is it the school districts usually win, or the parents usually win when this is brought up? I don't know.
So the other article that I was talking, anecdotally, and the other article I was talking about was based on that specifically. And, his research basically has reflected that taking New York out of the considerations and looking at all of the other due process cases, that generally school districts prevail more often. And I will tell you why. school districts don't do battle in these cases unless they feel pretty comfortable that they're going to prevail, that they have done the right thing for the child, because it is a complete waste of time, energy, staff, and money to litigate something like that doesn't have a good chance of prevailing. So I do think that school attorneys generally help their clients pick cases that are worth, doing battle over.
Yeah, and to be fair, of course, it's hard to be a special ed parent. It's hard to be a parent, period. But it's hard to be a special ed parent. They see the laws. They want the best for their kids. They're always pushing, and then there's that people don't understand. There's such a shortage of the professionals to help along. It's really, and then the federal laws say you have to do something, and it's mandated. They don't even give you the money to do it. I mean, it's just brutal out there, And
it's hard. It's heart-wrenching.
It is,
because there's so many things that need to be done, and we're seeing fewer people willing to step to the plate to do it. And COVID really impacted that in a really negative way, in terms of people feeling like life's too short for this, especially if they get entwined in one of these complaints or disputes. I've seen some really good teachers and other service providers that just say, I'm going to find something else to do.
Yeah.
And that's
it's
too
tough.
bad.
Yeah, it is too bad. And, it's just brutal out there. All that said, we still need more special educators. Okay?
Absolutely.
We need to resolve these things and all that. So let's do this. Case is going to let's go to the amazing Phyllis Wolfram. Okay? Case is going to have the Academy of Law and Leadership. When is that?
Yep.
Where is that? How is that? Ladies and gentlemen, the executive director of Case, Phyllis Wolfram.
Larry, the Case Academy of Law and Leadership will be in Minneapolis, Minnesota, April 16, 17, and 18. And registration is up on our website at casecec.org. I will tell you that a number of our presentations, the majority of our presentations, will be attorneys and special ed directors presenting together. So we're talking about here is the issue, here is the piece of IDEA that we implement in our school district. Here's some of the legal parameters, maybe even concerns or challenges around it, with the director saying, and here's how I implement this, here's how I deal with this in my school district. So it's not just the legal aspect, it's the practitioner perspective as well. And because as we talked earlier about the behavior being such a challenging issue for all of our directors, we are going to have a strand on behavior. We have invited a couple of our good friends as we talk. A number of our districts, and I would say a good majority of the districts around the nation, use CPI with the Crisis Prevention Institute. Maybe that's another friend I need to introduce you to.
Oh, please bring them on.
They have some new training coming out, and so they're going to do a strand for us at the conference, along with Cadre, the Center for Appropriate Dispute Resolution and Special Education. And then we're going to have a panel of attorneys, along with our headliner, Julie Weatherly, Jim Walsh, and Eric Hartwig. I know, she's fabulous, Julie Weatherly. I can attest to it firsthand. So anyway, we think we've got a great lineup. We feel like this is something that our members, as well as our followers, even if they're not members of CASE, we'd love everyone to be a member, but a number of people just take advantage of the professional learning that we're offering, and that's great. But we think we've got a great lineup for them, some great sessions. We've been working really hard to get this going, and we're excited for April to get here. So,
and I got to ask this, and this is really important. Okay, and it's just special ed administrators need to be there, but so do administrators. General administrators, and superintendents.
Especially.
Okay. I mean, they need to be there, too, because the special ed director knows all this. They run to them, and they go, what in the hell are you talking about? Okay? They can't, you know what I mean? They got to be there, because this is a big part of education these days. And how we doing on that?
We really,
getting them out there?
Yeah, we really encourage the special ed directors too. I mean, when you're in a larger school district, you have layers of people who have supervisory and positions of authority that need to understand this. So bring your staffs, and, including your principals and your assistant principals in particular, as we were talking about dealing with behavior and discipline. So come one, come all to the Case Academy of Law and Leadership. It's a personal invitation.
It's kcec.org. Awesome. Can they come virtually, or do they have to be there in person?
It is in person this year. So we're not offering a virtual component, but come visit with us, come network, come and meet your colleagues who can help you out. We're going to be face-to-face in Minneapolis.
Yeah, it's really, it's just so darn important because this is really happening. And, and Julie said it before, school districts are busy enough. They got enough aggravation out there. Okay, they don't need lawsuits one on top of the other. It just...
You are correct.
Am I correct? Nobody needs that. Nobody wants it. Okay?
Mm-hmm. You're right.
Yeah, you got to stop it. You got to stop it before, it begins. Okay, and understanding it all makes sense, and that's where we are. I mean, it's just incredible. Okay, Julie, when you look at all this, and even special ed administrators, do they have a good understanding of the law that surround them? And I'm asking that: the special ed administrators, do principals really understand it as well as they should? Do superintendents understand it? I don't know if they do.
That's a loaded question, Larry.
It is.
Fire away. It might be loaded.
Talk about putting me on the spot, but I guess in general, my one-word answer would be no, they're not generally aware. That's why I generally feel like I have way more than I can handle trying to get the word out. And please understand, it's not a matter of not wanting to know or wanting to understand. It's just not something that's necessarily included in their schooling. I do a training.
That's a challenge.
Yeah. I mean, I do a training that I co-created with a very experienced long-term educator. He's on the administrator side. And when I approached him about co-developing the program for those who serve as administrative leaders at IEP team meetings, he said he couldn't wait to do that because in that leadership training that many of our school administrators receive, special education is very rarely part of that. If it is, it's just a little piece of it. Yeah. When it winds up being 80 to 90% of the time an issue in their school, and they just don't know how to respond appropriately to it. And so that's a problem because schools can be held liable for not appropriately training their personnel to be compliant. It's a challenge.
Yeah. I would also add, in addition to that, Larry, the reason, one of the reasons we're doing the Academy of Law and Leadership, as well as continuing with our case conference, is so many new leaders in the field. We have so many retirements and people who said, I've put my 30 years in or even less. COVID was hard on a number of our educators. So what we know is that the majority of those leaders in special education, those directors and supervisors and coordinators, are really new. We do surveying when we're traveling across the country and talking about case, and almost in every meeting there is like 70% of the leaders that are in the room are within 1 to 5 years. And those are young. Those are young leaders. Maybe not in age, but in depth of knowledge about special ed administration. So it's important that we continue to do professional learning.
It really and truly is, and it has to just keep going. And with the one group that, and I've been to ask this before, we talk about administrators and principals and all that, but one of the keys in this, and we really talk about it, I don't know how CASE interacts with it, is the school boards. Okay, maybe I should ask Julie that. Julie, talk about the administrators, but they're the managers for a public bureaucracy. Okay, what's the word called? School boards. Yeah.
Well, I will actually, just based on my experience, and this disheartens me a good bit, it is very rare that I am asked to present to educate a school board on these obligations. We have a pretty good Alabama Association of School Boards here, and they do require board members to be trained, but they get to pick the topics. And unfortunately, special ed doesn't show up very often. But I will go and train a board anytime, anywhere, because they absolutely need the knowledge to be able to support what's going on and requests for staff. You know, when the special ed director says, we need more aides, we need more speech-language pathologists, whatever, the board understands how significant that is, because students that don't get those services under IDEA, they can sue over that. And,
wow.
It surprises me. I've had several districts I work with that were adamant, and their board would have me in once a year. And I always really appreciated that and appreciated their interest. But those are times gone now. So you're so right, though. That's so needed.
It really is, because they control the public funds. They they are the controllers. They're the voice of the people. It's amazing.
Absolutely.
This is just great. Okay, so everybody check in. It's Case CEC. It's their Academy of Law. It's in April. You got to go there. Minneapolis is a good place. Okay, in April. Okay, it's really going to be good stuff, and I hope everybody does. Okay, Julie, thanks for being here. I love it. Thanks.
Thank you, Larry.
You're welcome here anytime. You know that, and Phyllis, you know that too, don't you?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. And I'm gonna follow up on my top of the list things
Cadre
for you.
and CPI.
You got it. You got it, my friend.
It's good stuff. We'll get it together. All right. Both of you, thanks so much. This was just great. I appreciate it. Very informative. Thank you. Both of you, have a good day.
Thanks, Larry.
Bye
you.
now.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Okay, everybody, great. CaseCEC.org. And that's Julie Weatherly. Julie, just you can Google her. Resolutions in Special Education. That's her company. We're talking about the Case Academy of Law. And this whole thing's going to be archived at ace-ed.org. I'm Larry Jacobs. Thanks for listening.